Do you dream of living in Europe but are scared off by those really high taxes? Well, it is true that most European countries have a much higher tax rate than the US, but does that mean that it's actually more expensive to live in Europe? Today we're comparing total living costs, including taxes, between the US and Europe. And stay tuned, you might be in for a shocker.
Hi, I'm Matt.
And I'm Dawn.
And we're the unretirees. And last year, as I was approaching the traditional retirement age, we knew we didn't want to retire, but we also didn't want to put off our dream of living abroad and traveling the world either. So today we live and work from the Silver Coast of Portugal. And this channel is about living abroad, flexible income streams, and travel over 50. It sure would be great if you liked this video, click the subscribe button, and hit the bell so that you would be notified for any upcoming videos. You can also follow us on Instagram at The Unretirees, as well as sign up for our free newsletter that will include a link below in the description.
Now, a few really important caveats before we jump into today's topic, and that is, first and foremost, we are not tax experts. This is a comparison that we are doing based on information that anybody can source from the internet. As always, please consult a professional.
So for this video, we're going to use one very simple scenario, but the reality is there's so many different tax situations that would apply that there are hundreds, if not thousands, of possible tax scenarios. And that's just really way beyond the scope of this YouTube video, or honestly any YouTube video. Our recommendation would be, after you watch this video in this simple basic scenario, that you consult a tax professional for the country that you are considering moving to, and we'll give you our referral to the tax professional we used as we were considering moving to Portugal, if Portugal is your destination country.
The goal of this video is not to give you tax advice or even really to advise you if moving abroad makes sense for you. It's simply a way to consider the total cost of living, including taxes, so that you can be better informed, ask better questions, and make the right decision for you.
So let's take a look at a very specific example. And look, I'll guarantee you that this example does not match your tax scenario, just because there's so many tax scenarios that are possible out there. But we're going to look at a person who lives in Sacramento, California. We're going to compare that person to someone who lives in Coimbra, Portugal. These are just two cities that you can compare. And the reality is that the principles that we're going to talk about are principles that you would want to look at and consider when you are looking at moving from any city, specifically a US city, to any European city, whether it's Portugal or another European country. The specific scenario we're going to look at is this person makes $75,000 in Sacramento, which translates with the currency conversion to about 69,000 euros in Coimbra. And the person owns a home that's worth $400,000 in Sacramento, which translates to 367,000 euros in Coimbra. Which scenario do you think will come out ahead?
To compare, we're going to look at four specific things: income tax, property tax, cost of living, and healthcare.
For income taxes, of course, there are millions of scenarios out there, but we're going to take the simple scenario of a person who makes $75,000 in Sacramento and compare it to somebody who makes a similar amount, which would be 69,000 euros in Coimbra, Portugal. Our Sacramento guy, if you were to Google that, it would take you to several websites where you can calculate the federal and state income tax that would apply to income, and we did, and talent.com is the source that we used. And it showed that the income tax for our Sacramento person who makes $75,000 would be $19,714. And it would drop them going forward into the 41% tax bracket. Now let's compare that to the Portugal scenario. In the Portugal scenario, again, you can Google income tax calculators as well. In the Portugal tax scenario, where they make the similar dollar amount, which would be 69,000 euros, the income tax would be 20,234 euros. And that translates to about $22,000. So in Portugal, an equivalent of $75,000 income has a income tax of $22,000.
So based on this, we see that in Portugal, there are income taxes per year that are $2,300 higher than the US, which comes out to a little less than $200 per month. Now, as we said at the top of this video, there are a lot of variables that we have not included here, and that includes things like write-offs and tax-advantaged accounts and other factors. But as a general comparison, the difference between Portugal and California in this tax bracket, all of those things, is a little less than $200 per month difference.
So the next thing we're going to look at is property taxes, and this is where things begin to get interesting. Remember, we're going to look at our Sacramento person owning a home of $400,000, and the equivalent in Coimbra with the exchange rate would be $367,000. So let's look at property taxes for our Sacramento person versus our Portugal person. Now, in Sacramento, we go through Google and we can find that in general, the Sacramento property tax rate is 1.3%. So for a $400,000 house, that 1.3% would be $4,600 of property taxes per year.
Now let's go back to Google and see how much we would pay in property taxes for a comparably priced home in Portugal. So as Matt said, a home of comparable value in Portugal would be 367,000 euros based on the current exchange rate. And we see that we would pay 0.3% or 1,100 euros or $1,200 in annual property taxes. That's $3,400 less than a home for the same value in California. And keep in mind that a property in Sacramento may have additional HOA dues, utility assessments, and other fees, all of which are unusual in Portugal. Now, obviously, your monthly expenses are going to be about more than income tax and property tax. So let's look at the next category.
Well, so what about the cost of living when you compare somebody who lives in Sacramento, California to somebody who lives in Coimbra, Portugal? Well, so for this, we rely on a tool called expatistan.com. There are other tools out there, but this tool allows you to compare either two countries or two cities and see how the cost of living compares and drill down into details of food or housing or transportation or anything like that. We think it's a really valuable tool.
So based on Expatistan, we see that cost of living for a single person in Sacramento, California is $3,459 per month compared to 1,509 euros in Coimbra, Portugal. After converting currencies, Coimbra is 52.5% less than Sacramento. In fact, in nearly every category, Sacramento is at least double the cost of Coimbra. By the way, you can put any two cities into this tool to compare them. You can compare the city that you live in with the city you're thinking of moving to, or you can also compare different cities that you've sort of narrowed down your search to. But based on this, over a full year, the cost of living difference is $21,780 lower in Coimbra than Sacramento. But there is one huge factor that we haven't talked about yet, and it can't be ignored, especially if you're thinking about moving abroad after 50. Now, when it comes to the total cost of living, especially over 50, we cannot ignore healthcare. Countries like Portugal have significantly lower medical costs than the US, with healthcare quality that is ranked on par with the United States. Now, if you want to know more about that, you can look at this video here that we'll link above. But this is an important consideration since medical costs can often completely derail a retirement plan.
Recently, we've talked to some people who are over 50 who live in the United States, and look, their health insurance costs run between $900 and $1,200 a year. Now, I understand that there can be lots of variation in healthcare insurance costs just because you can match different things differently. But for the sake of this exercise, let's assume that our person in California is paying $1,000 a month for healthcare.
So once we move to Portugal, we pay for private health insurance that gives us access to both the public healthcare system as well as the private healthcare system, and we pay $225 each for that. We also pay for an additional medical concierge called Serenity. We've talked about them a lot. That helps us navigate the Portuguese medical system, and that cost is $18 a month. However, there are many people who do not pay for private insurance at all, since the public health system is available to all residents.
Well, now let's look at the big picture. So looking at the four categories we looked at: income tax, property taxes, cost of living, and healthcare costs. Let's look at what our person in California is paying. Every year, our person in Sacramento pays $19,714 in income tax. Property taxes run him $4,600. The monthly daily living cost, the cost of living, is $3,459 per month, which is $41,508 if you were to annualize that. And then health insurance runs $12,000 per year.
Now let's look at our guy in Coimbra, Portugal, and see what he pays per year. Every year he'll pay $22,000 in income taxes, $1,200 in property taxes. The cost of living is $1,644 a month, or $19,728 annually. And health care insurance is $2,916, although you could opt not to have private insurance and pay $0.
So that means our person in Portugal, even with a higher income tax in Portugal, would be spending less than our person in Sacramento, California. And not just a little less, would be spending $2,665 less per month living in Coimbra, Portugal, compared to Sacramento, California. Again, we are not tax professionals and we don't pretend to be, but if you are thinking about moving to Portugal or any European country, you're going to want to talk to a tax professional and compare your situation in your current city to where you're considering moving to. For us, as we were considering moving to Portugal, we booked several calls with an organization called Fresh IP here in Portugal, and they are people who are lawyers and tax professionals who are familiar not only with the Portugal tax and law system, but also with the United States tax system as well. And they were very informative to us. Now, we have no affiliation or affiliate with Fresh IP, so we just are telling you this because they were very helpful for us.
So tell us what you think. Is this a fair comparison? Tell us why or why not in the comments below. Also, what other comparison videos would you like to see? And if you'd like to see a video about what we do and do not miss about the US after a year in Portugal, watch this next video.